All right, let's build a simple flow to test HTTP request. And I'm going to go with the Instant Cloud Flow. HTTP test. Okay, let's do that. Manually trigger this flow, create. Okay, so just like every other connector, we need to search HTTP. Then we scroll down, that's the one. Click see more. This is the one we need, the HTTP, not the one with Swagger or Webhook, the plain one. Click that, and then so we get the URI, which is the endpoint. So the parameters it's asking for is the URI, the endpoint, the method, right? Headers and queries. So let's start with the URI. Let's go back to Postman and we'll get that URI for the random jokes. So that's the URI, just the endpoint. Put that in there, right? The method would be get. So there's different HTTP methods. There's get, there's delete, there's patch, there's post, there's puts. So you can see right now we are trying to get data from the endpoint. If you are connecting to your software or your application, you might not necessarily want to get information. You might want to post information, which means add information to what was there in the other system. You might want to delete information, or you might want to patch information or put information. So there's different ways that, or put data, So all we want is to get random jokes from this API endpoint, right? Okay, so right now, this API we are using is public and it doesn't require any authorization. For other APIs, you don't want to leave it open like this, or they wouldn't leave it open like this just for anyone to use it and basically get data from there. They would add like some sort of authorization, and that authorization usually you want to add, that's also going to be a name and value. So you want to add that you want to add that authorization in your header if you have the value of that. So you add the name and the value. That's going to be in the API documentation. So for this one, there's no authorization because it's open for anonymous calling. So you can be called anonymously. So also we don't have any queries. So for random jokes, example, for queries is like parameters where you want to filter out the response that you're going to get. So example for query, I could say I want to only return joke ID number 200, and then I'll have to put the query or the parameter as ID, and then I put the value of the ID. So again, you need the API documentation to know how to properly format these parameters. But again, because we're building a simple API flow, we are not adding any parameters so we're not adding any authorization in the header, we're not adding any header parameters, we're also not adding any queries. We're also not adding any content in the body, we're not adding any cookies. We're just adding the API endpoints and the method, and then we can test this, right? Let's save that first, and then we can test this. So it's a simple one. I've just added the API endpoints, I've put the method, and if I test and click manually test, run flow, that should give me, okay, so if I investigate this, I should get that, right? So let's check raw output. So that's the output, that's the response. Great. So status code 200 means successful. Again, when you receive response from your API queries, you would get a status code, and the status code will determine whether that call was successful or not. So the body, again, as you can see, so this is the header. These are some things that you probably would not need. So this gives you some information in case you need that if you're a developer. For body, this is what we need. So we need that type, general, setup, that's the setup, the punchline, and the ID, just like we got from here. So it's basically the same thing, but a different joke. So what we've done here, in case you still don't understand, is we have connected Power Automate to a random API, a random web application, a web server, and we've pulled information from that server using HTTP request. And even though this is quite simple, this example is simple, you can use this in a very complex way, where if you were to connect to maybe a bank, so if you're working with a bank app or something, so if you're building application with a bank app, or you're building an application with maybe a restaurant's booking system, you can get the API information or API documentation from the people that designed the restaurant's application. You can use Power Automate to create workflows that talks to that restaurant's web application, whereby you can use Power Automate to automatically create bookings, remove bookings, modify bookings, and do a whole lot of stuff. So just think about the possibilities of using this in this case. So if we go and so let's make this particular flow more usable. So when we click, so what we want to do is when we click this manually trigger a flow, we want to send an email to ourselves, right? Using the we want to send an email to ourselves with the joke. So every day, so when we click the trigger, manually trigger flow, we want to receive the joke via email, because we don't want to be reading the backend of Power Automate to find the joke. So if we add a connector for Outlook, or you can use, let's use Gmail, right? Let's use Gmail. So send email, get this email from here, send email, I'm gonna send it to myself, right? And the parameters, I'll do subject and body, right? I click on subject, new joke, and body. Okay, so this is where it gets a bit tricky. So from our flow, the trigger, we manually trigger the flow, right? We use HTTP to get jokes, and that joke is formatted in JSON format, like I showed you. So this is the JSON format. This is the format that the joke comes in. It comes in the form of this bracket, the name and the value. So name value, comma, name value, comma, and all of that. So this is basically JSON. You can see there, it's JSON. So if we want to use dynamic content to retrieve the content from this HTTP request, we are not going to be able to. So we can get the body. Okay, so I'm just going to show you an example. So right now we have the HTTP request step, we have the body and the status code. So if we click on body, let's see what we get. So that's the body of, that's the response basically, the body of the HTTP request. So let's test this just so we can see. That's basically going to give us, okay, a second. So let's test, manually trigger this. Like I said, oh wait, sorry, there's an error. Your flow was saved but could not be enabled because it contains connectors. Okay, the same issue with the Gmail connector. So let's delete this and use Outlook instead again. I kind of suspected that it wasn't gonna work with Gmail because there's a lot of restrictions with Gmail. So let's do the same thing for Outlook instead. The same thing. So you can do Office 365, send an email. We want to send an email. Send an email, yeah. Let's open Outlook in a different tab. Okay, so we want to send it to ourselves. Subject, new joke, and body. Let's do this. So we're taking the body directly from the HTTP request. And remember, this is the body. So you can see body. This is what we returned when we queried this API. And that's what we should get. So if we save that now, since we replaced, we run into an error drive, correct correlation ID. That's strange. Okay, let me try to save again. Don't know why it gave me that error. Okay, yeah, sometimes strange things happen. I just saved again and it saved this time. So if I test this flow, click on test, great, continue, run this flow. Oh, sorry, this flow is currently turned off. So I need to turn the flow on first because of the initial error we got with that Gmail. So I'm just gonna turn that on. Gonna edit this flow again, and then I test again. Manually test, run flow. Okay, great. So if we go to our Gmail, we should receive a new joke. Great. So now we've got a body. So basically, this same body that we saw here has been sent to us via email. But this doesn't really make any sense if we're going to be sending this to a user, right? We don't want to send the joke. This doesn't look very funny, does it? We want to remove all of this unnecessary, content and only send the actual joke via email. But how do we do that? Because in our flow, if we go back to edit the flow, in our flow, we only have, so when we go to dynamic contents, we only have body and status code from our HTTP request step. So it means that we can only take the body, we can only take the status code. So let's do something. So what we can do is we can use an action called parse JSON. Parse JSON is used for transforming JSON data in a way where Power Automate can understand the content better. So if we use parse JSON, search parse JSON, we should get the data operation called parse JSON. And if we go to data operations and click on see more, you can see there's more data operations where you can compose, you can create HTML table, you can join different data, you can select. So basically, if you've ever done SQL, if you've ever played with data in an SQL database, you would understand some of these operations. So what we want is this parse JSON, and we click on that. So the step just right after the HTTP request. So we want to pass the JSON that is received from this HTTP request, and we want to get the content from the body, right? So the body, remember, this is the body. This is the body. So this is what we want to format. So we want to format this, and that's the body. So we've included the body as the content, and the schema basically means how is. So what this is a way to let Power Automate know what to expect. So he wants to know what is the format that the information that you're expecting will be coming in. I mean, he knows that it's going to be JSON, but what is he supposed to expect? Is he supposed to expect a type? How will you know he's supposed to expect a type, a setup, and a punchline or an ID? Or could there be maybe an extra parameter, maybe popularity or something? So again, using this step is basically for you to define or let Power Automate know what to expect from this data that you've told it to format. So I can use sample payload to generate schema because I don't need to generate this. I don't need to write the schema by myself. So I'll click on this use sample payload. And the sample payload is basically the body. You can just copy the body of that you received from the API request and paste it in Power Automate as a sample JSON payload, right? You just paste that, and Power Automate will see that and automatically understand and use that to create a schema. So you can see, so now we have a schema. It knows that it's expecting a type, which is object, and the properties of that object is type string, the setup, the type is string 2, um, the punchline, the type is string, the ID, the type is integer. So he just basically created a schema that he knows now, he understands, and he will be properly able to understand or decode the results that we get from the HTTP request. So if we go back to send an email, we would have more options now outside of body, and we will have more options from the parse JSON. So we'll delete, or let's leave this so you can see the difference. So let's say unformatted, right? And then put formatted here. And then this time we're going to put the setup and the punchline. So now we can now find the body setup and the body's punchline, because now we've used parse.json to break down this request into things that Power Automate can understand and can be used. So we put body setup, and then after body setup, in the next line, let's put punchline, body punchline. So that's what we wanted, right? We don't want the type included in the joke. We don't want all of this different format. We just want the setup and the punchline. So we save that, and then once we're done with that, we save that, and then we test again. So we can see the difference between what we had before and what we have now. So that's good. Flow is saved, and we can test manually. Then click on that, run flow, right? Let's check our email. We should get a new email. Great. So now you can see the unformatted JSON before we did the parse JSON was this is how it would have come if we just use body. This is the JSON. But formatted version is what is the least spoken language in the world? Sign language. That's actually funny. But yeah, I hope we do understand the use of HTTP requests, what APIs are now, and why we need to understand JSON or what JSON is used for. But yeah, so with this, we've been able to use HTTP requests. We've also been able to connect to APIs, and we've been able to use that in the flow. So thank you very much. See you the next lesson.